At 6:12 on a Thursday morning, Lena Calder's phone vibrated across the kitchen counter in Louisville. She almost let it ring out. Then she saw the name, Eli. Her cousin did not call before sunrise unless something had broken, flooded, burned, or died. Lena picked up with one hand still wrapped around a coffee mug, and Eli said 3 words. They flagged it. Then the line went dead. He did not explain what had been flagged. He did not say who had done it. He did not have to. In that family, there was only one piece of ground important enough to make a man hang up before he trusted himself to say more. The Calder farm sat 2 hours east of Louisville, outside a little Kentucky town, where the roads bent around limestone ridges and old tobacco barns leaned into weather like they were listening for bad news. Lena had not slept well that week. Her grandmother Miriam had been dead for 8 months, and the estate had turned every family meal into arithmetic. Shares, appraisals, maintenance, taxes, offers, obligations. Words that made the land sound smaller every time someone used them. But Eli's phrase did not sound like arithmetic. It sounded like somebody had driven a stake into a body. Lena left her coffee untouched. She put on yesterday's jeans, grabbed the ring of keys Miriam had given her 5 years earlier, and drove east while the sky was still the color of wet ash. She knew the road by muscle, not by memory. The low-water bridge that always rattled the passenger side door. The curve where wild onions grew in spring. The mile of narrow blacktop where the ridge blocked every radio station except one gospel station out of Moorhead. Then the road dropped toward the old Calder gate, and Lena saw the flags. Not one, dozens. Bright yellow survey flags ran along the fence line, through the lower hayfield, past the cattle gap, and up toward the limestone rise behind the spring house. They were too bright against the brown October grass, too clean, too new. The way a warning looks when it has not yet learned how to blend into the place it is warning about. There was a sign wired to the gate, under contract. The name beneath it belonged to a land acquisition company Lena had never heard of. Redfern Carbon and Minerals. Someone had zip-tied the sign so tight, the plastic cut into the old cedar post Miriam's husband had set by hand in 1969. Lena stopped the car in the road and stared. The farm was 276 acres of Kentucky ridge country, creek bottom, rough pasture, second-growth timber, and a stone spring house built over water that had run cold before anyone in her family had a name for it. The Calders had owned the place since 1904, when Lena's great-great-grandfather bought cut-over land from the Blue Lick Salt Company, after the company decided the timber was gone and the hills were no longer worth guarding. The company left. The family stayed. They stayed through bad tobacco years, through 2 bank scares, through a barn fire, through marriages, funerals, droughts, and every kind of quiet disappointment a farm can collect without looking dramatic from the road. Miriam Calder Voss had been born on that land in 1936. She had left it exactly twice for more than a week. Once to help her sister after a surgery in Ohio, and once to sit beside Lena in a hospital room after Lena's father died. Miriam had not been sentimental in the soft way people expected old women to be. She believed sentiment was useless If it did not make you repair the fence, read the paper, or keep a spare coil of wire in the truck. She also believed people signed away more than they understood. That was one of the reasons Lena was standing there now, staring at a corporate sign on her grandmother's gate. The estate executor was Lena's uncle Russell, Miriam's oldest living son. Russell had legal authority. He had never loved the farm the way Miriam did. He had respected it, maybe. He had worked it when he had to. But he saw land the way a practical man sees a locked box in a burning house. If you cannot carry the box, sell what is inside before the fire reaches it. Lena did not go through the gate. She backed up, turned around at the mailboxes, and drove half a mile to the lane that cut toward the spring house, because the flags were not what scared her most. What scared her was the fact that Miriam had prepared her for this moment, long before Lena understood there was a moment coming. 5 years earlier, Miriam had called Lena to the spring house on a hot June afternoon. She was 83 then, still strong enough to carry feed in one hand and a cane in the other, still sharp enough to correct the bank when they misprinted her middle initial. She had pointed to a rusted nail on the inside wall, half hidden behind a row of old canning jars. On that nail hung a small brass key tied to a red thread. Miriam had said, "I'm not giving you this because you are special. I am giving it to you because you notice what other people step over." Lena had laughed because she thought her grandmother was making one of her hard little compliments. Miriam had not laughed. She had touched the stone wall beside the spring, the place where the mortar dipped lower than it should have. "When the family starts talking faster than they are reading," Miriam said, "come here first." Lena had remembered the sentence because it was strange. Now, with yellow flags running across the lower field, it no longer sounded strange. It sounded like instructions. The spring house was older than the farmhouse. Limestone walls, slate roof, one warped blue door, and a trough cut into the stone floor where the water moved through, even in August. Inside, the air was cold enough to raise bumps along Lena's arms. The smell hit her first. Mineral water, damp stone, old metal, and the faint, sweet trace of apples from the wooden crates Miriam had once stored there in fall. The brass key was still on its nail. The red thread had faded almost pink. Lena took it down. She knelt at the section of wall Miriam had touched years earlier and pressed against the low mortar line. Nothing moved. She pressed again. A flat stone shifted inward, with a slow scrape that seemed far too loud in that small room. Behind it was a narrow cavity. Inside the cavity sat a mailing tube wrapped in waxed cloth, black with age at the edges and tied with baling twine. Lena pulled it out and sat on the spring house floor while cold water moved beside her. The brass key opened a small lock on the tube's cap. Inside were 4 things. An original deed from 1904. A quitclaim release filed in 1948. A 12-page letter from a Lexington property attorney dated August 1976. And a note in Miriam's handwriting, written on the blue-lined paper she used only when she wanted nobody to pretend they had misunderstood her. Lena read the note first. "Lena, if this paper is in your hand, the hill is probably being treated like dirt instead of ground. Read the lawyer's letter before you get angry. Read the deed before you get scared. Do not argue from feeling. Argue from the record. I showed you the key because you see small things before they become large ones. Miriam. Lena read the note twice. Then she read the letter. By the time she finished, the spring house felt colder than it had when she walked in. The 1904 deed was not just a sale of farmland. It had been drafted by the Blue Lick Salt Company, and the company's lawyers had included the usual reservations: salt, brine, stone, oil, gas, and any underground formation the company might someday need. That part was ordinary for its time. But in 1948, after the salt company dissolved and its assets were being cleared, a quitclaim release had returned those reserved rights to the Calder family. Nobody in the family had talked about it. Nobody had needed to. For decades, the farm was a farm, and the underground was just the underground. Then in 1976, when Miriam paid to have the boundary resurveyed, her attorney noticed an old covenant buried in the 1904 deed. The covenant said no owner of the surface could convey, lease, or encumber spring, brine, mineral, gas, oil, storage, or subterranean rights without written consent from every living direct descendant of the original grantee's children. The attorney did not promise it would survive a court fight forever. He did say something else. Any transfer that ignored it would carry a title cloud large enough to stop an insured closing. Lena understood the words one at a time. Title cloud, subterranean rights, written consent, every living direct descendant. Then she remembered the name on the gate. Redfern Carbon and Minerals. Not Redfern Farms, not Redfern Timber. Carbon and Minerals. She folded the documents back into the tube, locked it, and drove to town with the tube on the passenger seat. The lawyer she found was named Rosa Harlan. Rosa was 52, blunt, and had practiced land, probate, and mineral title law in eastern Kentucky long enough to make people tell the truth by asking very quiet questions. She read for almost 2 hours without speaking. Then she asked Lena for the acquisition company's name. Lena gave it to her. Rosa typed, searched, clicked through filings, and her face changed only once. Not much. Just enough for Lena to see it. Rosa leaned back and said, "Your uncle did not sell a farm. He sold access." Lena felt the room tilt. Rosa turned the screen toward her. Redfern had been buying options across 3 counties for 18 months. Not for crops, not for subdivisions, not for cattle. For pore space. Deep underground storage capacity in a sandstone formation beneath the ridge line. Companies were paying for the right to inject and store carbon dioxide under rural land, and the old Calder farm sat over a section of formation that was larger and cleaner than the county maps had suggested 5 years earlier. The contract Russell signed conveyed the surface, the mineral estate, water rights, brine rights, and subsurface storage rights in one broad clause, written so smoothly a person could miss it 3 times and still think it was ordinary. The price was $1,076,000, more than farmland alone should have brought. Not nearly what the underground access might be worth. Rosa tapped Miriam's attorney letter with one finger. This is the problem Redfern has. Maybe this covenant wins in court. Maybe it does not. But title insurance is not court. Title insurance is risk, and this paragraph is risk. What happens if I do not consent? Lena asked. Then they either carve out the underground rights, renegotiate, or spend months trying to force a closing nobody will insure. Russell has authority over the estate. He has authority to act for the estate, Rosa said. He does not have authority to make a cloud disappear by pretending he did not see it. Lena sat there and looked at Miriam's blue-lined note. Do not argue from feeling. Argue from the record. That evening, Lena called Russell from the farmhouse kitchen. The house smelled stale. Too many rooms had been shut for too long. The table where Miriam used to sort seed catalogs had 3 folders on it, all labeled in Russell's blocky handwriting. Sale, tax, distribution. Russell answered on the 4th ring. Lena did not soften her voice. Why didn't you tell us Redfern was buying underground rights? There was a pause, just long enough to be an answer. Then Russell said, They are buying the farm. No, they are buying the farm, the minerals, the brine, the water, and the storage rights under the ridge. Lena, don't start making this into something. It already is something. Russell breathed out hard. You think I wanted to do this? The insurance alone is eating us alive. The roof needs work. The back fence is down. 3 people want their share now, not in 10 years. I got the best offer on the table. Did you get an independent underground valuation? Silence. Russell. No. Did Redfern tell you why they were paying above pasture value? They said future land use flexibility. Lena almost laughed, but it would have come out too sharp. Future land use flexibility is what a company says when the truth is expensive. She told him about the spring house, the key, the tube, the 1904 deed, the 1948 release, the 1976 letter. For the first time in the call, Russell did not interrupt. When she finished, he said, That old language may not mean anything. It means enough for a title company to stop. You are going to blow up the sale. I am going to make sure we know what we are selling. Some of us need that money. The sentence landed because it was true. That was the hard part. Russell was not a villain standing at the gate with a match. He was a tired man, carrying numbers nobody else wanted to carry. He had medical bills. His sister had debt. 2 cousins had already spent money they did not have, because they believed the sale was coming. Lena knew all of that. Miriam would have known it too. But need did not make ignorance a fair price. Lena said, Give me 21 days. Let Rosa file notice of the title issue. Let me get a subsurface valuation. If there is nothing there, I will sign the consent and the sale moves forward. If there is something there, we renegotiate before we give it away. Russell was quiet for so long Lena could hear the refrigerator click on behind her. Then he said, 21 days. The geologist was Dr. Celia Marr. She had taught at the University of Kentucky for 30 years, consulted on mineral and storage rights after retirement, and arrived at the Calder farm in a mud-splattered Subaru with 2 cases of equipment and no patience for family drama. Lena paid her retainer with money she had been saving for a bathroom renovation. For 3 days, Dr. Marr walked the ridge, reviewed old survey data, checked state filings, compared depth maps, and took shallow samples where the limestone broke through the pasture. She did not give Lena comfort while she worked. She gave measurements. On the 4th day, she sent Rosa a report. The report was 14 pages. Lena read the first three and had to stand up. The eastern 192 acres of the Calder farm sat above a deep, porous sandstone section, suitable for commercial carbon storage. The formation thickness, pressure profile, and access geometry made the site materially more valuable than ordinary rural pore space acreage. Dr. Marr's conservative estimate placed the 30-year storage and related brine access value between $24 and $41 million, depending on injection volume, federal credit structure, and development timing. The contract had folded those rights into a surface sale premium of roughly $180,000. Lena stared at that number. $180,000 for rights that might produce tens of millions over the life of a project. Miriam had not known those exact numbers when she hid the tube. The newest surveys had not existed then, but she had known the old paperwork mattered. She had known a family can lose the future in one quiet sentence inside a contract. Rosa filed formal notice that same afternoon. Redfern's attorneys responded in less than a day. That was how Lena knew they had been waiting for the problem and hoping it would not arrive. The negotiation lasted 12 days. Russell came to the first meeting angry and left it silent. Redfern's counsel insisted the covenant was archaic. Rosa agreed it was old. She did not agree it was harmless. They said the family had already accepted a premium. Rosa placed Dr. Marr's report on the table and asked whether their premium had been calculated before or after their internal storage model. They said the closing could proceed while the matter was resolved later. Rosa asked which title company had agreed to insure that position. Nobody answered. By the third meeting, the shape of the deal changed. The family would allow the surface sale to proceed at the agreed price, but the subsurface storage and brine access rights would no longer be transferred outright. Instead, Redfern would receive a development lease. The Calder estate and its heirs would receive 11% of gross storage revenue and 6% of any brine byproduct revenue for 30 years, with audit rights and renewal approval. Every living required descendant would sign consent only after the royalty agreement was attached and recorded. The papers were signed on November 18th, one day before Redfern's amended closing deadline. Afterward, Russell stood in the parking lot outside Rosa's office with both hands in his coat pockets. He looked older than he had 3 weeks earlier. Finally, he said, "Your grandmother knew." Lena shook her head. She did not know about Redfern. She did not know about carbon storage. She did not know the number. She knew enough. Yes, Lena said. She knew enough to leave a record where only the person who checked the stone would find it. Russell looked toward the courthouse. I thought she was stubborn about papers because she didn't trust people. Lena thought about that. Then she said, maybe she kept papers because she knew people get tired. The farm still sold. That was the part nobody put in the clean version. The gate changed hands. The lower field changed hands. The spring house changed hands. The farmhouse would be emptied, the keys returned, the sign removed, and eventually a different sign would go up. Lena did not save the Calder farm. She saved the part of it nobody had thought to count. On the last afternoon before the closing, she drove there alone. The yellow flags were still in the grass, fluttering in a cold wind. She went to the spring house and stood inside with the mailing tube in her arms. The cavity in the wall was empty now, The flat stone leaned against her boot. The water moved through the trough, exactly as it had the day Miriam showed her the key, exactly as it had before Miriam was born, exactly as it would after the deed changed names. Lena placed one new document inside the tube, a recorded copy of the royalty agreement. Then she locked the cap. She did not put it back in the wall. The spring house belonged to someone else now. The record did not. She drove back to Louisville with the tube on the passenger seat and Miriam's brass key in the cup holder. The first royalty payment would not come for years, maybe longer. Development was not a faucet a company turned on the day after closing. There would be permits, wells, injection tests, fights, inspections, delays, and more paperwork than any of them wanted to imagine. But the difference had already been made. The family no longer had a one-time check for surface land and a mistake buried beneath it. They had a recorded right to participate in whatever the underground became. Miriam's preparation had turned a hidden sentence into leverage. That was the inheritance. Not the money, not the land, the leverage. Lena thought about the day in the spring house when she was 30, when Miriam told her she noticed what other people stepped over. At the time, Lena had heard it as praise. Now she understood it as burden. Noticing is not romantic. It makes you difficult at meetings. It makes you ask for the page nobody brought. It makes you stop at the gate when everyone else is already talking about distribution. It makes you the person who slows a family down long enough to keep them from signing away the thing they have not named. Months later, Lena bought a small fireproof safe and placed the mailing tube inside. The 1904 deed, the 1948 release, the 1976 letter, Miriam's note, the recorded royalty agreement, and the brass key tied to a faded red thread. She did not know which child, niece, nephew, or cousin would one day need to understand why they were there. She only knew she would watch for the one who noticed hinges, fence wire, odd language, missing pages, and stones that did not sit like the stones around them. When that person was old enough, she would show them the safe. She would not make it dramatic. Miriam had never needed drama to be clear. Lena would simply place the key in their hand and say, "This is not for opening something now. This is for the day everyone is moving too fast." And she would mean exactly what Miriam had meant. Because some inheritances arrive as land, some arrive as money, and some arrive as a small brass key, given years before the trouble, by a woman who understood that a family's future can hide inside one sentence everybody else was too tired to read.